Welcome to Nowhere, Chapter 16. During those first few weeks in Zaatari camp, our family started falling apart. Ma couldn't stop crying. Baba was silent and tight-faced. Then he'd lash out in anger. Musa lay about all day, pale with pain. Fuad was never there. He'd joined a gang of other 6-year-olds and was out roaming around the camp all day long. Nadia and Iman were the only two who were cheerful. Nadia because she didn't know what was going on, and Iman because she was still thrilled to have escaped from Mr. Nosy rat-faced Bilal. And me? I felt like the dog's body, fetching and carrying all day long. It was, Omar, go fetch some water. Omar, get over to the bread queue before it gets too long. Omar, they've given out vouchers for buckets. Go and pick ours up. Omar this, Omar that, Omar the next thing. It wasn't only our family who used me like a beast of burden. Riyad appeared outside our tent at least twice a day, making a soft little coughing noise, then calling out, Musa, are you there? Hanan, her eldest daughter, was 8, and she went out on errands all the time too. I'd often see her staggering back to the tent with a heavy bucket of water, or a pack of nappies from the distribution centre for the baby. But there were things that were too big for her to carry, and Ma would send me off to help. I did it because, in truth, I did feel a bit sorry for them. But then I'd catch sight of Riyad, who was running wild with kids older than himself. He'd be throwing stones at the cars of foreign bigwigs, who liked to come and see us in our misery, or stealing a piece of bread out of the bag an old woman was carrying on her back. Ma was snobbish about Riyad. Her husband was only a labourer, you know. No education at all. People like that. I don't care what her husband did, I'd say crossly, when I dumped some big jerry cans of water outside the tent next door. I just want to know why she doesn't get Riyad to do her dirty work for her. Shh, she'll hear you. Ma was right. You could hear every cough, curse, sneeze, burp, and worse from the tent alongside. I'd woken up on her second morning and asked Baba what the time was. It's 7 o'clock. Riyad had hopefully called out from next door. In Dara, we'd got used to living without electricity or running water. On the farm, got accustomed to working every day out in the fields. But no one could ever get used to living in a tent in the middle of a desert with the winter coming on. By the end of October, it was so cold at night that we lay shivering under our thin UN blankets, even though we'd piled up all our clothes on top of ourselves. It began to rain, and the desert dust turned to thick, smelly mud, which was impossible to keep out of the tent. There were floods all over the camp, and you had to watch out for snakes too, which had been flushed out of their holes. Inside the tent, the damp got into everything, and it was impossible to keep our things dry. Fuad didn't seem to notice how uncomfortable everything had got. He'd become really naughty, copying the hundreds of kids like Riyad who were running all over the camp with no dads or big brothers to keep them under control. Fuad's so spoiled, he gets away with anything, I complained to Iman. If I'd behaved like that when I was his age, Baba would have gone berserk. Why doesn't he do something? Don't ask me, Iman would reply. I mean, look at him. We both looked at Baba, and see how hopeless and withdrawn he'd become. He believed in government, Musa joined in, with more sympathy than either Iman or I felt. He can't bear what they're doing to Syria. It was Ma who got really angry with Fuad. The third time he came back to the tent, filthy from head to foot, after he'd fallen into a greasy puddle, she shouted, How do you expect me to wash your clothes? Who's going to fetch the water? Where do you think I can dry them? Baba had roused himself at the sound of her angry voice and told Fuad that he wasn't allowed to go out again unless someone went with him. I knew, of course, who that someone would be. So from then on, every time I squelched off through the mud and puddles to queue for water from the big tank or fetch her supplies of food, I had to tow Fuad along behind with me, while he muttered resentfully all the time. To be fair to Fuad, though, he didn't stay resentful for long. He never admitted it to me, but I think he'd started to get upset with the things that other kids were doing. The stone throwing, bullying and stealing. He liked being useful too. The camp authorities had stopped giving us disgusting ready-cooked meals, and instead we had to collect supplies of things like rice and pasta, lentils, oil and sugar to cook for ourselves. They give us vouchers too, which Ma could swap at a supermarket which had opened in the camp. Even though there wasn't enough for fresh vegetables or fruit, Ma and Eman managed to produce meals which we could actually eat without gagging, though there was never enough to make me feel full. The camp was slowly changing. Every day huge trucks were bringing in rectangular white cabins like big caravans, and people were being moved into them out of the tents. Ma kept a watchful eye on what was going on. She had to use the communal kitchen to cook our food, and always came back with stories to tell. "You wouldn't believe what that tall woman told me," she'd say. "Those armed thugs, those Shabia, they arrested her husband for nothing. Nothing. He just picked up a piece of paper off the pavement and was reading it, and they grabbed him and bundled him away. When she got his body back for burial, she could hardly recognize him. His—" "That's enough, Layla," Baba would interrupt furiously. Ma would toss her head rebelliously. "It's no wonder the kids here have turned into little animals, and Ima and I are scared to go out to the tent. The things they've seen." But she'd be talking to empty air. Baba would have already pushed back the flap of the tent and gone out. It was a sunny day in late November when we finally got our caravan. I was halfway to the water tank with 2 empty jerry cans when I saw Baba almost running towards me. "We've got our caravan," he panted. "Come with me." I lifted the jerry cans to show him what I was carrying. "Ma sent me for water, Baba. Hadn't I better do it first?" "Never mind that. Just come. Someone else might sneak in and take it." He turned and strode off. I had to hurry to keep up with him. "Isn't it official then? Who can take it if it's really ours?" "I don't trust anyone anymore." His voice was bitter. "Syrians used to be good people. They're all a bunch of criminals now. You have to spend weeks living in a damp cold tent in the middle of a desert to realize how good it is to have 4 walls and a roof, a window and a door. Even if the walls are made of PVC that drips with condensation, and there's only one room to share between 7 people. Baba stayed to guard our new home, while I ran back to the tent to tell everyone the good news. I couldn't wait to see Ma's face. "You've all got to come now," I said, bursting into the tent. "Baba's got us a caravan." I might as well have said, "It's Tuesday today and the sun is shining," because no one took any notice of me. Ma was sitting on one of the mattresses with Iman on one side of her and Moose on the other. They had their arms round her and were trying to comfort her as she sobbed uncontrollably. Iman looked up and saw me. She met someone at the kitchen from Auntie Fauzia's village. It was bombed last week. "Uncle Mahmud's badly hurt. He's lost his left arm. He's in hospital." And Jabber's disappeared. Ma struggled to get free of their encircling arms. "We've got to go back. How can I leave my sister in this trouble? She needs me." "Ma, we can't go back," Musa said. "Think of Nadia and Fuad, and Baba will be arrested." "I don't care. Let them kill us all," Ma shouted, upsetting Nadia, who'd been playing quietly with a couple of spoons and a plate, and who now began to cry. "Anything's better than living in this misery. I can't bear it." "Well," I said, seizing my chance, "you won't have to. Baba's got us a caravan. He sent me to tell you. We've got to move into it today." If we hadn't got our caravan that day, I do believe that Ma really might have taken us all back to Syria. She'd have joined the dozens of desperate people who queued up each morning at the exit, fighting to get on the buses that would take them back home, preferring bombs and probable death to slow despair of the camp. They were just a fraction, though, of the number of people coming the other way. Thousands were arriving every day, some with bandages around their heads or arms in sling, some half hysterical, some silent and withdrawn. I kept a sharp lookout as newcomers came in, wondering if anyone I knew was among them, but they never were. It took a surprisingly long time to pack up our stuff, ready to move. We'd acquired more than I thought: buckets and a broom, plates and cups, pots and pans, as well as the things we'd brought with us. I was shoving my few spare clothes into a plastic carrier bag when I heard a familiar cough outside the tent. Riyad didn't bother to be invited in, but lifted the canvas flap and stepped straight inside. "I couldn't help overhearing," she said to Ma. "Have you had bad news from home?" Ma's lips tightened. I won't burden you with our family troubles, Riyadh. I'm sure you've got enough of your own. Riyadh wasn't going to be put off. And now you're moving. That's right. Riyadh's face collapsed into a mask of misery. But I'll be alone. How am I going to manage? I'm a widow with 4 children. I thought you were my friends. Oh, my dear, said Ma, softening a bit. I'm sorry, I really am. But we're not leaving the camp. We'll still be here for you, and your own cabin will come through soon. I'm sure of it. Riyadh caught hot hold of her arm. Ask Abu Musa to help me. Ask him to get me a cabin. An educated man like him. I don't think he... Ma was prizing Riyadh's fingers off her arm. I'm not sure if... But I'll ask him. Of course I will. Ma, what about these wet clothes? Iman called out. I don't want to pack them with the dry stuff. Put them in the bucket, said Ma. Ford can carry them. Nadia, what are you doing, Habidi? Don't take all those clothes out of the bag again. It was a wonderful moving from the tent to the cabin. It felt like a step out of misery into something just a bit better. Although we had a heater, which made the evenings more bearable, we still had no electricity. It was now the end of November and getting dark earlier all the time. It was horrible without proper light in the evenings, but we were dry and warmer and able to keep reasonably clean. The best thing was privacy. We could talk in normal voices now, knowing that Riyadh wasn't just on the other side of the 2 thin pieces of canvas. You know what this caravan means? Musa asked me the day after we moved in. Yes, Mr. Clever. It means that we're more comfortable, or hadn't you noticed? It means, Musa said, staring out of the open door, that the United Nations people think we're going to be here for a long time. The war in Syria's got years to go. If you're planning to go home, you'd better think again. That brought me up short. I suppose I'd assumed that things would soon sort themselves out back home. The rebels would win, or the government would win, and we'd be able to go back to Dara, or better still, to Bosra, and get the builders in and repair a flat or a house so we could live in it, and life would go back to normal. A horrible thought struck me. You don't mean we're going to have to live in this dump forever? He shrugged. How should I know? He tapped the lid of his laptop. But I can tell you that things in Syria are getting worse, not better. I didn't really want to know, if I'm honest. News from home was so depressing that I could hardly bear to listen to it. I didn't know if Musa was still in touch with Bassem and the others, or even what had happened to them. I was pretty sure, though, that Musa wasn't involved in dodgy stuff anymore. Now that we were out of Syria, there wasn't anything he could do except try to keep up to date with what was happening. On that terrifying day when we dashed away from the farm and made it out of Syria, I thought that Musa was daft to load himself down with his laptop, but I quickly realised that he'd done the right thing. Information was the most precious thing of all in the camp. Everyone was desperate for the news of what was going on in Syria, and to hear from the ones who dared to make the risky journey on to Europe and try their chances there. Musa was super careful with his laptop. He used it only for a few minutes at a time to save the battery. Even with the spare one Bassem had given him, the thing had run out of juice completely by the time we moved into the caravan. So, who did Musa fix with his big brown eyes to sort the problem out and get his laptop charged? You got it, my good self. Ma watched me pack the laptop carefully into a bag to hide it from any chancer who might snatch it off me. Then she dug into one of her own bags and brought out her battered old mobile. I looked at it doubtfully. Doesn't look as if it will ever work again, Ma. Try, Habibi. How can I go on without news of my sister? Without this, who can I talk to but Allah? Fuad was so used to going with me whenever I went on an errand that he automatically followed me out of the caravan. I stood outside the door uncertainly, not knowing where to go. There was some electricity in the camp, on wires running overhead. They fed the street lamps in the compounds of the aid agencies. I guessed too that the enclosures around the edge of the camp, where the aid organisations or Jordanian authorities had their bases, would have good connections. I set off uncertainly towards the main UN compound. They'll never let me charge this stuff, I told myself hopelessly, but at least I'll be able to tell Musa that I tried. Ford trotted along at my side. Where are we going, Omar? To the UN compound, I said, trying to sound certain and dignified. Where else? He smirked. I know where else. They won't help you. Come with me. He darted off so fast, dodging between rows of tents, that I couldn't keep up with him. Watch it, I yelled. You'll slip in a puddle. Mal go berserk. He slowed down at last, and I managed to catch up with him. I grabbed his shoulders to stop him running off again. So where is this magical recharging place then? Or are you having me on? I panted. He squirmed out of my grip. I'll show you. We're nearly there. I'd been so busy up at our end of the camp, going to and from the distribution centre and the water tanks, I hadn't explored this area. We walked a little further on, then came out from between the two tents, onto a long straight track that ran as far as I could see down the middle of the camp. It was as full of people, as bright and colourful, as a busy shopping centre in that street in Dara had always been on a Saturday afternoon. I almost had to rub my eyes. There were shops, real shops. Some were in tents, with the flaps pulled back to show the goods on tables. Inside. Others seemed to be made of parts of caravans, their end walls taken off so that they opened onto the street. Quite a few had signboards up on their roofs, each one brightly painted with the name of the shop and advertisements for whatever it was selling. I could see a clothes store, a fruit and vegetable stall, a shoe shop with a display of boots, trainers and sandals, a proper cafe with little vases of plastic flowers on the tables, and best of all, a shawarma stall. The revolving spindle of roasting lamb sent out such a wonderful smell that saliva sprouted in my mouth. Mind your back, someone behind me called out. I whipped round and leaped out of the way. 4 men were pushing a huge caravan along on a big set of wheels. They edged it into an empty space at the end of the row of shops, then stood in a cluster while a wad of money changed hands. I realised that Fuad had disappeared. Looking round, I caught sight of him peeping out from behind a toy stall. He came out cautiously. Has he gone? Has who gone? There's a policeman over there, didn't you see? He looked anxious and guilty. And why, little brother, would you be so scared of a policeman? It wasn't me, Omar, honestly, it was the others, and it was only apples. Fuad, I said sternly, feeling like a real big brother. We're good people in our family, we do not steal. We have, I groped for the right word, respect. I know, he said in a small voice. Don't tell Baba, will you? I won't if... I paused, enjoying the power the scared look in his face was giving me. Then I relented and put my arm around his shoulders. I won't if you show me where I can get Moose's stupid laptop recharged. He grinned with relief. It's a deal. The electrical shop was quite a way down the shopping street. I walked slowly, fascinated by what was going on. It looked as if some place had been open for a while. They had piles of goods and really nice displays. Not as brilliant as the ones I'd made, of course, but not bad. What interested me most of all were the men standing on tops of the caravan shops, working on the electric cables that fed the street lamps. There was a forest of wires up there. I could see that the men were attaching more lines to bring electricity down into the shops. We reached the electrical store at last. High above it was a hoarding made out of a section of caravan wall, with the words phone painted on it, and logos for internet and phone connections. Down below at the front of the shop was a counter. A man was standing behind it. He had a screwdriver in his hand and was fiddling with an old computer. Behind him was a display of radios, fans, hairdryers, and even a couple of TVs. Beside him on the counter was a forest of wires running into a jumble of mobile phones. I felt as if I'd been transported back to Syria, to somewhere normal, somewhere familiar and safe and decent. The man looked up and caught my eye. I took the bag off my shoulder, lifted out the laptop and mobile, and put them down on the counter. Please, uncle, I said, can you charge them for me? He shook his head. Too many to do already. Look at all this lot. Bring them back on Friday. On Friday? But my ma, she's so worried about sister. Her village has been bombed on. He shrugged. I told you, come on Friday. Inshallah, I can do it then. Fuad is bobbing up and down beside me. Look, Omar, there's a TV on over there. It's got a cartoon on. The sound of my name, the man frowned and looked at me more closely. I thought you'd look familiar. I know you, don't I? I don't know, I said, backing away. Don't trust anyone, Bab had warned me again and again. Then the man smiled. Don't you remember me? I'm Abu Radwan. I had a shop in Basra next to the man you called Uncle Ali. You used to work for Murray in the morning, didn't you? He said you're a good kid. Grown a bit, haven't you? I relaxed and smiled back at him. I did remember him now. He often stopped by to talk to Uncle Ali. Is Uncle Ali all right? I asked him. He got scared when that man Bilal came and threatened him. Bilal? Abu Radwan looked as if he wanted to spit. That snake? Yes, your Uncle Ali got out of Basra. I think he went to Damascus to join his son. I haven't heard anything since. His son was a smart lad. He'd got his old dad to safety. Uncle Ali won't be going back to Basra anyway. Neither will I. All the shops in our row were bombed out. I lost more or less everything. He picked up the laptop and Ma's phone. I put out my hands to take them from him, but he put them aside on the counter. Don't worry, son, leave them with me. Priority job. I'll give you a good price too. Come back tomorrow morning. I thanked him and turned to go. And welcome to the Champs-Élysées, he called after me. The what? But he was already serving his next customer, a woman with a baby in her arms. Batteries, yeah, Abu Radwan, she was saying in a shrill voice. You promised me yesterday. I can't find any in the whole Champs-Élysées. How am I going to heat my baby's milk? Abu Radwan reached up and took a box down from a shelf. How many? 4. They settled down to haggle over the price. 4, I said as he walked away. I owe you one. We were passing a tent shop with a table outside covered with a display of sweets. How'd you like a lollipop? He looked up at me shocked. But you said, Omar, you said we shouldn't steal. Not stealing, silly. I'm going to buy you one. I reached into the pocket of my heavy winter jacket. There's a hole in it, and through it I could feel inside the lining. I'd hugged the knowledge of my secret hoard of postcard money all the while. I'd have to spend some of it. I knew on recharging the laptop and phone, but I reckoned that Fuad and I deserved a treat. Which colour do you want, red, yellow or green? I asked him, feeling grand and generous. He spent a long time choosing. I didn't want to hurry him. Red, he said at last. 2 reds, I said to the sweet seller, handing over a precious note. It had been such a long time since either of us had tasted such heavenly sweetness that we didn't talk at all till we were nearly back at the cabin. Here, wipe your mouth, it's all sticky, I told Fuad. And don't tell the others, eh? I'm not made of money.